Hi, I'm Bea Moorhead, Executive Director of Texas Impact. We help Texans of faith and conscience to engage in the public policy process, including advocating on issues they care about and interacting with lawmakers at all levels of government. It's an important prerequisite for effective advocacy to understand the systems and structures of government. Texas has a very open government process compared to other states. Nevertheless, sometimes it's good to have a tour guide to help you find your way around. Our project LegeTV makes the legislative process more transparent by broadcasting clips from legislative hearings and other activities in the Capitol. We don't edit our legislative clips or try to spin them because we think it's important for constituents and voters to make their own evaluation of what they see. But sometimes it helps to provide a little context, and that's what we've done here in this clip, in which Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts, Glenn Hegar, provides a briefing to the Texas House Appropriations Committee on the state's revenue outlook for the next biennium. Just by way of background, the Texas Comptroller is a constitutionally established statewide office. In some states, the Comptroller is basically the state's CPA, but in Texas, it's much more. And one of the most important roles of the Comptroller in Texas is preparing the Biennial Revenue Estimate, or BRE. The BRE gives the legislature the boundaries for what they can spend in the state's biennial budget. Preparing the BRE is an enormously complex undertaking that employs an econometric model, sophisticated calculations, and a little bit of intuition. In this video you're about to watch, Comptroller Hegar walks through the high-level overview of the BRE, which will guide the state's budget process for fiscal years 2026 through 2027, and that biennium starts September 1st, 2025. If you want to see more details, you can view the entire BRE on the Comptroller's website at the link on your screen. It's accessible from the homepage. You might think that a presentation on state tax collections and fund balances sounds dry and uninteresting, but the revenue system undergirds every function of government, from the roads we drive on to the schools our kids attend to programs that keep our food and water safe and much more. State government can't operate without funding. As the saying goes, we may not like taxes, but we like the stuff our taxes pay for. Texas and the country are having big discussions right now about taxes and spending, and it's important for voters to understand the basics. We have made one important edit in this video. In the Comptroller's presentation to the Appropriations Committee, the committee members were looking at a set of slides that were not visible if you were watching online. We've inserted the slides into the video so that you can see each slide as Comptroller Hegar discusses it. Other than that, the presentation is unedited. We hope you'll enjoy Comptroller Glenn Hegar's presentation of the Biennial Revenue Estimate to the Texas House Appropriations Committee.
Mr. Chairman, members, for the record, my name is Glenn Hegar, Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. You have a presentation today, and if you don't mind, we're going to go through the slides kind of quickly, but if I'm going to point you first to the very first page, which looks something like this, and it is titled Revenue Available for General Purpose Spending. 7 Biennial Revenue Estimate shows that the legislature has an estimated $194.6 billion available for general purpose spending for the 26-27 biennium, a decrease of 1.1% from the corresponding amounts of the 24-25 biennium. The total includes an ending balance of $23.8 billion from the current 2-year budget period, which ends August 31 of this year. In addition to the $23.8 billion in cash carryover, the 26-27 biennium includes tax revenues of $155.4 billion and non-tax receipts of $21 billion. The $23.8 billion projected ending balance for the 24-25 biennium is robust, but it differs in meaningful ways from the record-shattering ending balance projected in the BRE just 2 years ago. The previous ending balance reflected astonishing revenue growth coming out of the pandemic-related shutdowns, skyrocketing inflation, and an influx of federal money. It allowed you to make critical investments in infrastructure, including broadband, water, higher education, our parks, as well as provide significant property tax relief while maintaining a balanced budget that left money on the table for 26-27. The projected ending balance in this BRE has a different makeup. It reflects conservative fiscal management practices and spending decisions, while other states that reported big balances now are experiencing deficit. It includes unspent contingent appropriations of $4.5 billion for public education and education savings accounts, because as you know, the 88th legislature did not enact the requisite legislation. In addition, a full $7.33 billion of balance is due to general related revenue dedicated accounts. This is money that has been collected for specific purposes, but hasn't been spent, allowing it to be considered when certifying the budget as balanced. This estimated ending balance does not account for any revenue-related spending that may be authorized through a supplemental appropriation bill. Additional spending would, of course, reduce the funds available. The ending balance of the 24-25 biennium will be determined by the actions of the 89th legislature and by actual revenue collections during the remainder of this fiscal year. Now, if you actually look at the next page, which is titled Certification Ending Balance, this is just simply to show you very quickly prior ending balances going through back to 2011 session. Now, if you don't mind, the next page, which you can see at the top, is titled Sales Tax and Total Tax Collections. You will recall that our state tax collections soared after the easing of the COVID-related constraints in fiscal year 2022 and 23 to previous levels that had not been seen before in our state. Over the last 28 years, a total tax increases averaged 5.2% per year, yet in fiscal 2022, they increased a record-shattering 25.6% as compared to prior fiscal years. That increase was along with 40-year high record inflation, enormous infusion of federal dollars into the economy, all that contributed to last session's historical cash carryover balances. The Texas economy is projected to grow through fiscal 2025 through 2027, but at a slower pace than what we have had historically. This reflects a returning to more typical economic conditions and ongoing reactions to consumers and businesses to higher interest rates aimed at easing and controlling inflation. About 88% of total revenue-related funds for the 26-27 biennium is projected to come from tax revenues. Sales tax is our revenue system's mainstay. It has made up more than half of the annual state general revenue-related tax collections since 1988. In the 26-27 sales tax collections are projected to be 59% of all total tax collections. It is important to emphasize that our sales tax base is significantly higher than what it was 10 years ago. When I became controller, sales tax collections were less than $29 billion in fiscal year 2015. However, today, they are estimated at almost $49 billion. Thus, an even modest increase in growth can result in substantial amounts of dollars. The next largest sources of general revenue in 26-27 are projected to be motor vehicle sales and rental taxes, oil production taxes, franchise tax, and insurance tax. Now, if you don't mind, I'd ask you to turn to the next page, which, as you can see, this one here, which is titled Oil Production, Prices, and Tax Collections. Oil and natural gas tax collections are the product of two factors. One, price. Second, production. The oil price has fluctuated wildly over the last 20 years, and historically there have been large swings in natural gas prices. Oil production, meanwhile, has experienced a significant change that also affects other parts of our economy. It is no longer tied to rig count. Horizontal drilling and improved fracking techniques now allow companies to produce more oil with fewer rigs. From fiscal 2014 through 2024, the number of active rigs has actually decreased by 65%. Yet oil production during that same period has increased by 92%. This makes oil production more efficient, but it also has a ripple effect on sales tax collections from and employment in the mining sector. With fewer rigs, there's a drop in hiring and purchasing of taxable equipment and other goods related to well development. Looking at severance tax collections, oil prices in 2025 are projected to average $70 a barrel. then rise to $71 a barrel in 2026 and $76 in 2027. Tax revenues will be around $11.8 billion in both the current and the upcoming biennia. Natural gas prices in the 26-27 biennium will slightly rebound based on an increase in power demand from artificial intelligence, data centers, crypto mining, along with a rise in LNG demand. I project that natural gas collections for the 26-27 biennium will grow by 25.5% to be $5.35 billion. Now, if you don't mind, if you turn to the next slide, which you can see says transfers to the ESF, Economic Stabilization Fund, and State Highway Fund. Here you will see that we project a transfer of $5.1 billion from oil and natural gas collections to the State Highway Fund to support our transportation system as required by the Texas Constitution. We will typically would also transfer a similar amount of oil and gas revenues for the Economic Stabilization Fund, or also we call the Rainy Day Fund, but we are going to only send partial allocations for fiscal 2026, and there will be no allocation in 27 because the ESF, the Rainy Day Fund balance, will exceed its constitutional cap from the start of the biennium. By the end of 2026-27 biennium, the Economic Stabilization Fund is expected to grow to be more than $28.5 billion, absent any additional appropriations from that fund. Now, if you don't mind, you can turn to the next page, which is Economic Stabilization Fund ending balances. This page simply shows the ESF balances in fiscal years 22 through 24, estimated balances from fiscal years 25 through 27 in relation to the calculated constitutional cap for the Economic Stabilization Fund balance. As a reminder, the state constitution provision caps the ESF balance at amount equal to 10% of general revenue deposited during the previous biennium. The Rainy Day Fund will hit its cap at the beginning of fiscal 2026 with partial transfers in 2025 severance tax revenue, reducing the amount of money to be transferred and preventing any additional transfers into the fund for fiscal years 2027 and 2028. The total amounts of severance taxes that will be retained in GR is projected to be $5.9 billion in fiscal 2025 and 2027. Thus, the Rainy Day Fund will likely continue hitting its constitutional cap in subsequent biennium from here forward. Please turn to the next page, which looks something like this, which is titled Economic Stabilization Fund Long-Term Forecast. I bring up this page as a policy discussion that needs to be discussed. A question that deserves your attention is whether part of the severance taxes should continue to go into the Economic Stabilization Fund for future generations, or should the cap remain in place and thus those severance taxes flow back into general revenue from here forward. When the cap is reached, the 37.5% of severance tax collections that are typically set aside for the ESF will remain in general revenue, as well as interest income on the Economic Stabilization Fund cash balance. This chart estimates the projected balance of the Rainy Day Fund due to the constitutional cap and if the cap did not exist, thus allowing severance tax transfers and interest income on the ESF cash balances to remain in the fund. For illustration purposes, the comparison simply runs through 2035. Despite the halt on transfers and interest income, the total ESF balance is projected to grow due to investment income on the invested portion of the fund. This is a result of changes that I pushed for, you approved, to invest the ESF in prudent ways that maintains its purchasing power and liquidity while keeping only 10% of the fund balance in cash or its equivalent. Before this change, we were required to manage the Rainy Day Fund in a way basically that amounted to burying it here on the Capitol lawn. Don't go look, because it's not really there. Additionally, I need to note that as to federal income, I expect that the state will receive $115 billion in federal income along with $70.7 billion in other revenues that are dedicated for specific purposes and therefore unavailable for general purpose spending. Thus, revenue collections from all sources, and those all purposes in 26-27 is for a total projection of $362.2 billion. With some new members on the committee, I thought it would be helpful for you to have, for future reference, that there's a spreadsheet in your information that shows that I created several years ago that shows the volatility in data sales of tax motor vehicle sales, and rental taxes and severance taxes from 96 to the present. So I just wanted you to have that. We're not going to talk about it. The last thing I want to make, as always, I remind you that biennial revenue estimates, as well as our underlying assumptions and projections to make up the BRE, are inevitably affected by events that are outside our control. Texas is not immune to the threats that come from global uncertainties. Wars and unrest in other countries affect our security and put our supply chains at disruption. Here at home, even though inflation is slowing, it will take some time and leadership to address the continued damage effects to our record inflation that we're having. If changes arise in our assumptions and revenues move in different directions than I laid out here before you today, then as always, I will keep you and the taxpayers informed of those changes as we see them. With that, Mr. Chairman, members, I'm happy to answer any questions and whatever your new system of lights is presenting to you on this day.